We're still waiting for one more chair, so I'll just stand here for the moment. But for the moment, can I ask the panelists to come up to the stage, and I'll just do a very brief introduction. I will let the panelists introduce themselves, but just to set the scene for the actual panel session itself. I mean, this, first and foremost, we've got some experts from industry. And I'm going to be asking these guys to have a bit of a mix of opinion. First of all, we like a bit of blue sky thinking. We want to know what the potential and the real power of this technology is. But then I'm also going to be pulling you guys back as well and ask to put a bit of pragmatism on the situation. So first and foremost, my chair has arrived. I'm going to start at the end with Hamish. If everyone could just take a couple of seconds to introduce themselves and where you come from. I know you've already briefly done it, but we'll kick off that side.
So, Hamish McLeod, Director of Mobile UK, which is the organisation through which the 4 mobile network operators in the UK work on a broad range of issues, but mostly public policy stuff around regulatory change and such like.
Regis Professor Raim Tafezoli, founder and director of 5G Innovation Center at the University of Surrey.
I'm Geraldine Iraeta. I represent the Digital Catapult. We are an organization that focuses on enabling industry with the adoption of advanced digital technologies like 5G.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dalia Adib. I'm from STL Partners. We are a research and consulting firm based in the UK, and we recently did a project with Huawei to evaluate the value of 5G on various industries, focusing on manufacturing and healthcare. So outside you may be able to find these handouts if you want more information, but I'll drip feed some of the findings of that research in this conversation today.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, guys. And the first question I'd like to ask, and I'll be honest, Hamish, you stole a bit of my thunder during your presentation there. I was going to ask everyone about the hype cycle of 5G. You know, have we actually got it right? Because I think you hit the point pretty much spot on earlier. We are very good as an industry at overhyping technology. Now, how does everyone feel about 5G at the moment? I mean, have we got it right? Have we educated the consumer enough? Have we engaged ecosystems enough? Are we developing those use cases? I mean, how does everyone feel we are developing the technology as it really starts to come to market? So, who's brave enough to kick off first? Raheem?
Okay, thanks. Well, I don't think 5G is overhyped. I used to get that question for the last 7 years since we started 5G Innovation Center. And the more we go through the standards, release 15, release 16, release 17 is supposed to come, and very soon, within the next 18 months, we see that more aspects of 5G technology is going to be standardized as we originally envisioned in 2012, 2013. So 5G, as Hamish said, every generation we say it is overhyped. 3G came and we look at the applications, smartphone managed, 3G managed to show some aspects and capability of the smartphones until 4G came, that we saw the full capability of the smartphones. So what 5G is enabling is a fabric of connectivity, which supports high bandwidth, low latency, and massive connectivity. And we thought that these are the common features across many, many use cases. I think initially we did 2015, not only us, but also ETSI, European Telecom Standard Institute, as well as 3GP. Look at more than 15 different applications, not only for mobile broadband, but also other industrial ones. And we said these 3 factors, which we never designed a network for low latency. We never designed a network for mass connectivity. It will embrace and cover many, many different applications. So what we see now is being deployed by all the UK operators in UK, as well as other countries. Probably we see only maximum, if I'm generous, say about 30% of what 5G can do. The other 70%, which is a game changer, it is beyond mobile broadband. It's for Industry 4.0, for gaming, for health, for connected vehicles, connected motorways, and etc. That is a game changer. And that process of the standard is ongoing very fast. As Bob said, the speed of development of the standards is so fast. And we will see next 3-4 years the big changes that 5G is going to bring. And I think everything we promised 6-7 years ago is happening.
I guess one thing you've really got to, and the Geraldina and Hamish, I'm going to look to you two particularly for this question, is you can get all of that with the technology, but without the supporting ecosystem to drive through that last 70%, you know, that's where perhaps the overhype comes from. So from a telco perspective, and then from obviously the work we do in the digital catapult, and then Dalia, the research that you've done with Huawei. I mean, how is the ecosystem developing? Is that a barrier, or are we getting there?
I think the ecosystem is the start of the journey. Because how Rahim was talking about is that 17%. Of course, the consumer adoption of 5G is going to happen, and it's happening now. But the value comes in the industrial application of the technology and how it enables other technologies to play a role in becoming a factory more productive, in entertainment, in live production and stages, in the deployment of content to multiple channels and industries. That's where you start to, first of all, educate industries of what the potential of 5G is, and then helping them experiment, which is one of our roles, is opening up those 5G test beds for commercialization to experiment. And some of the work that DCMS has been doing across the UK is experimenting. What are the right use cases? What does it mean to industry? So industry then starts to do the exploration and then finding which ones are the right use cases for them to deploy in their factories, or in the creative industries, for example, in entertainment, content, and gaming, as you mentioned. And it's also working with the startups and the scale-ups. They are super key in you getting the adoption, because if they understand how to use the technology, how to develop their new products, and then derive in new business models, that's where you start getting the adoption, because you need, yes, definitely the demand from industry, but you need the supply from the innovators that are creating those products that are using the network capability that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing to add on what everyone has been saying, which I completely agree with, is that I actually think hype is important for 5G and is actually a positive term for 5G, because it's getting attention from the industries in a way that we haven't seen before with regards to mobile technology. And I know whether you're an operator, whether you're Huawei, or whether you are a sort of 5G innovation center, enterprises from the industry are going to our industry to understand what is 5G. I've heard it means a lot to me. What is it? And it will help to drive what is happening in these ecosystems and for things to get practical very quickly. So that's one point on hype. I think the second thing that we haven't really addressed is that the 5G hype cycle may be a kind of bumpy one, because probably unlike previous generations, 5G and how it's built and how it will rest on virtualized platforms means that it's going to be a continuously iterative and sort of continuously evolving technology. And so, now we are kind of in the enhanced mobile broadband wave of 5G, although it's getting traction around latency and some of these other capabilities. But we'll probably see another wave of 5G hype once these new capabilities come in and, as I said, continuously evolve in the future.
I mean, that's quite an interesting point in when you're actually talking about enhanced mobile broadband and latency. I mean, Hamish, I'm going to kick this across to you as a representative of the MNOs. I mean, be pragmatic. What services can be delivered over the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years. And when you're talking about latency, obviously release 16 is a big thing that's coming up on the horizon of the next, well, it's supposed to be 3 months. Let's be realistic. It's probably 9 to 12 months. Now, what can be delivered now, and what is Blue Sky thinking over the next 7 to 10 years?
Well, I know you're following up with operator panels, so I'm going to duck that question because I think it really is up to them to speak for themselves on that particular point and how much they're prepared to reveal at this point. But I would like to pick up on the hype thing. I think I agree with that. I think you need to have that sense of excitement. There are some unhelpful aspects, I have to say. I mean, the number of people out there in the general public say we're going to have transmitters every 15 yards and this sort of thing. You know, that's sort of unhelpful and doesn't bear any relationship to how the operators are currently building their networks, which essentially is an enhancement of the macro network with infill for very high capacity areas. So that's sort of an unhelpful thing. But I think the creating that sense of excitement is important. I think there are sectors that are under huge pressure to change. So if we take automotive and the pressures of climate change and what have you, and this movement from buy cars and own cars to mobility as a service, that's a great change which will be very good for our productivity, but also based on wireless connectivity. Healthcare is another sector that is under huge pressure to change. All these new medicines and what have you coming available, very, very hard to afford. So the focus has to change much more towards preventative, and the government has strongly signalled the move to the preventative medicine, and they have a lot of skin in the game to invest in preventative stuff. So there's plenty of money there, at this point, to generate the volume and the application. So those are two sectors I'm particularly optimistic about.
So I'll open this up to all four as well, actually, because, again, you bring up an interesting point about some industries needing to change. Now, there's some verticals and some industries which are really aggressively looking to adopt 5G and new communications technologies. But are they the ones that need it the most? You talk about healthcare. Let's be completely honest, forcing any change in the UK healthcare system has failed countless times and probably will fail a couple more times until we actually get it right. Are the verticals that are in need of this change, are they the ones that are driving towards it? Who wants to?
Yeah, there's been a huge amount of market studies been done, health, gaming, manufacturing, and etc. I can't remember all of them. And they say that how much it would reduce the cost of the operation if they adopt 5G or 4G or combination of both. It's not only just 5G. And how much they would increase the productivity, how much they will reduce the cost of operation, and etc. So I think there's a huge amount of studies been done. But we say that if they adopt it, if they adopt it, I think the if is a big word here. Many industry, verticals, non-telecom industry, they don't know what is the capability 5G offers. So when Huawei set up the skills and training center in Birmingham, free of charge, so to train people to say, what is 5G? What is a 5G capability? I would encourage most of the non-telecom industry to go there, to send their people there, to be trained, to say what 5G means. And one good thing that UK government, DCMS, is doing through the 5G testbed and trial is getting the non-telecom industry and telecom industry to work with each other, to understand and have a common vocabulary, understand each other. Hopefully that would establish a trust and establish the capability of what 5G can do, and everybody can go back to their own industry and work at what is the benefit of adopting 5G in their own networks. You mentioned that MNOs, if they're ready, whatever it is, I tell you this, that it's not going to be just MNOs. I know all the MNOs are here in UK. We are going to have an explosion of newcomers. It's going to be lots of people, lots of organizations will have their own private networks. And it is not only just MNOs. MNOs can provide private networks from their public network, or we are going to see lots of industry will adopt their own private network. So, and 5G, we're talking about the ecosystem, is the first mobile telecom network, which is more open to ecosystem. You can ask for some SLA from operator A and say, I want my vehicles to be connected by BMW, Toyota, or whatever it is. They just specify one SLA. And then the network automatically spin up the slices to provide that service. So 5G will be more open than 4G and 3G and previous generation system, but in a controlled manner. So it will be open to ecosystem. And that yet to come.
So Geraldina, you're obviously working very, very sort of intensely with these new ecosystems and the startups that are potentially going to offer these new services. I mean, what are the real barriers and the worries that, to deliver some of these services that Raheem is talking about there? I mean, from a feet on the ground working with these guys, what are these new companies saying to you that are the biggest barriers to entry for 5G and the digital ecosystem?
So some of the barriers that they talk about is access to the technology to experiment themselves.
Access to
the technology to experiment with it.
Okay.
So access to the network, to the 5G, understanding what the features are. How do you configure their own, if they're using immersive, VR or AR headsets, how do they configure them to make the most of the technology? Or how do their products work? What's the impact of it? And then what are the use cases where they go and implement these products? So that's, some of the impact that comes from the DCMS work, as well as the work that we're doing in opening up these test beds to these innovators so they can go and experiment. But it's not only that, it's educating them. So some of the work that Huawei is doing on the education piece about what does 5G enable. So that's one of the barriers that it's being addressed, but it could be more. The other thing that they want to know is who are the industrial adopters and who are going to be the first ones, right? Because they need customers. So they need customers for the products that they're building. And obviously, some of the questions that are being asked is, if we're looking at private networks, so who's going to run them? Is it going to be the mobile operators who are going to be providing them? Is it going to be new entrants coming in? The cake is going to be a bigger, right? So there's going to be more slices that are going to be spread across industries. Are the industrial companies going to be incentivized to have some of their spectrum so they go and run their own private networks? Question mark, question mark, question mark. So these are some of the questions that they're asking. Some of them are challenges, and some of them are at the same time are opportunities. Because there are, the 5G technology enables new business models, new products, and the technologies that we already know around AI and immersive and blockchain to make a real impact in industry. So it's all those things that, we're trying to get an ecosystem to work it out.
I suppose one of the things you really need to know is who's got the money and who's going to spend the money. So, and then obviously that ties into a lot of the research that you guys do.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you hinted at it, Geraldine. There is a key factor which is somewhat controlled by the mobile operator, which is how they deliver these services and which business model. And I think there are certain industries, to your original question about barriers, there are some industries which do need 5G and the capabilities it brings, but they also have a tough business case to make. So I'm thinking particularly agriculture as an industry.
Yep.
There's a lot of hype about things like the smart cow or the smart chicken or, whatever it is. But for a farmer, the price they sell a chicken at could be $1 in certain markets or most markets, or sub $1. So if you're going to provide a device that attaches to that chicken, then making sure that it's at a price point that makes sense, or at least, the connectivity is supplied in a way that makes sense to that farmer is a big question for mobile operators or whoever's going to provide that service. And then I guess the second thing is, the business model question also applies to private networks as well. And I think there's a lot of ambiguity still around what is the private network business model and to what extent is that going to be owned and controlled and managed by the end enterprise, and to what extent is there a role for a mobile operator or a new type of operator that may exist in the future. Because although companies like Bosch and Siemens are very much interested in private networks, there is still a question mark around are they going to start investing in network engineers? Are they going to start building their own capabilities in-house to run those networks? Or do they expect operators to do it? And then again, how does the operator sell that service? And what's the business model around it?
Well, I guess that's something we've been addressing quite a lot recently is, how are the telcos going to lose? Are SIs going to come in and steal some of the pie? Are the cloud players going to come in and steal a bit more of the pie that they're already getting? But I guess this is, well, I'll open this up to everyone, is really, how easy is it or is it ever going to be possible for an enterprise company to go out and hire their own network engineers, or will there always be a space for the telcos in the private campus network sort of world of tomorrow?
It slightly reminds me of the debate, again, which happened, 20 years ago, as to whether public Wi-Fi was a threat to the mobile network operators and all these other technologies. And there was, is it a threat, is it complementary, or a substitute? And in the end, I think we could say that they worked in a complementary fashion, without going to the adverb. And who knows at this point, but what is absolutely certain is that there will always be a place for national operators to operate at scale with all the investment and the resources that requires, and how the private systems fit into that ecosystem. I think the market will determine, actually. Some will perhaps have enough money to do it themselves. I would suspect most will not.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I recently spoke to an oil and gas company who were interested in private networks and sort of edge computing as well, and potentially 5G. And one of the things that they brought up was that they are not, sort of private networking is actually kind of a plan B or C for them, and they would as much as possible want to use a public network, mainly because it's more cost effective for them, and they can rely on someone else with the expertise to run that kind of network. So again, it's trying to understand, I think, cutting through the hype, and to what extent is private networks going to happen in a way that it's been described as, in terms of the end enterprises completely running their own network, and what types of enterprises truly want that, is something that I guess we'll figure out. Okay.
Well, I think we're sort of pushing towards the end now, I think. Well, I think we've got about 5 to 10 minutes left, so I want to sort of push on to a topic which probably no one wants to discuss considering the last couple of weeks, but we're going to push on to policy, politics, regulation. There's something happened last week, and it's probably needs to be addressed by everyone, because it could have been, it's ending a little bit of speculation. So we've got a majority government finally in place. What does that mean for the telecoms industry? What does that mean for the growing digital ecosystem? And from startups through to the academic research, through to the MNOs, or even how people are looking to spend money in the individual verticals. Are you guys worried about the political climate at the moment, or the policy landscape?
Well, taking the B word first, perhaps, the point that gets regularly made to me by the operators is data, and the ability for data to be able to flow freely across boundaries. So that's going to be an extremely important point to get right. And the skills, make sure that the UK has the access to the appropriate skills. I think at a domestic level, we need to kick on with reform of the planning system, as I talked about, and making it easier to roll out the network in general. There will be other new regulatory challenges around privacy and security and all those sorts of things. So the new government will certainly have to take up those topics with gusto. But if they get the Brexit policies right, I think there's no reason to be anything other than optimistic for the UK economy.
Okay. From an academic perspective, I mean, obviously the B word is a big one here, and it ties into a lot of what you guys do. I mean, do you feel that? How does Brexit look for you pre and post as an academic?
Well, some people know in this room that we had 1/3 of our research funding came from European Commission. 1/3 of big chunk was coming out. So Boris Johnson's brother, when he was the head of the universities and education, he promised he's going to carry on doing the same support of the science and engineering as we've been doing in collaboration with the rest of Europe in terms of the European Commission of Horizon 2020 and beyond, and etc. So from that point of view, I'm not afraid. I think that UK, different politicians, different parties, they're all committed to a better connectivity, better infrastructure for the UK, as well as supporting innovation and advanced research on science and engineering side. So I'm optimistic and I'm positive about the horizon, despite all these noises that we hear. So probably I don't have any other choice than being positive. Put it this way.
So I mean, how do you feel from looking at the developing ecosystem and the startups in particular? I mean, do you feel that there's enough support for them right now?
I think there is. I think there is enough support, and we will continue to run the innovation and acceleration programs that we do up to this point, providing them access to the technology so they can experiment, create new products and new business models, and enabling, because our focus is on the UK. So it's making sure that we deliver economic impact for the UK with helping that ecosystem to reap the benefits of what the technology can do. And that is with any government. We will continue to do the same thing. So in a way, we are positive and we are opportunistic about what the opportunities that technology provides to industry, and we'll continue to advocate for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think to Geraldine's point, I think there's a lot that is somewhat not determined by which government is in power. So the role of the regulators is quite strong, and I know Ofcom is doing a lot in terms of exploring new spectrum pricing models and spectrum allocation models, and that is hugely important for things like private networks and network slicing. But I guess one thing that maybe the government could and should do is a little bit more on joining up sort of different industry bodies and regulators in a way that makes sense and will create an innovative environment. And so what I mean by that is that it's all good to look at the regulation in the telecom sector and provide a way to accelerate 5G rollout, whatever it might be. But equally important is the role of the regulator in other industries in sort of accepting and in introducing technology and adopting technology, particularly when it impacts things like health and safety regulation in that industry, which can be quite slow to change, or anything else. And I think a lot of many of the 5G use cases are, the business case for it are things like improving health and safety.
Yeah.
So I think, that's where having a sort of more joined up approach, or as a government understanding the role of 5G in these different industries plays a part.
So I just want to, one final question before we're going to sort of finish up, and then we're going to have a very, very, very quick coffee break. Be very, very pragmatic with this answer now. Where is the money in the next 2 or 3 years? What are the use cases which are genuinely an opportunity. Not talking about not autonomous vehicles here. We're not talking about the tired, very, very, very tired use case of robotic surgery. We want you to be sort of pragmatic. So, where's the money?
I think it's in the creative industries. It's entertainment, it's content, it's broadcasting. I think that's where it's going to be immediate. And then later on, you will see manufacturing. That's my take.
Yeah. Gaming based on virtual reality, augmented reality, or mix of those. And we will see the traditional smartphone will change to become more wearable. So that's a big change we'll see. And that's what 5G will change the shape of the smartphones, make gaming.
Hamish?
Yes, I think for once the answer isn't the porn industry. I think it is the entertainment, I think, will be a very good, in its broadest sense, a good place to start with the consumer, because that's what's here and now.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's probably two broad categories, like you say. There's consumer. I'm not sure how much it will significantly grow the operators' revenues, but certainly there's money for the application providers and for the content providers. And then a lot of it will probably come from private networks initially in creating these more closed environments for industry. And then hopefully we may start to see it in sort of the public network space as well.
Perfect, perfect. Well, guys, I really appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to come chat to me. And we are going to have a very short break, and then we'll be back with 3, O2, and E/BT after the break.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks a lot.
Hello, so we're going to kick off with the second panel session. So with the first one being focused on industry, now we're going to bring up 3 of the 4 UK MNOs. So guys, if you would like to come up to the stage, I'll ask you to introduce yourselves. So, well, a little mini bio to start with. So we've got Phil from 3, Daniela from O2 UK Telefonica, and Tom from BTE. So obviously 30 seconds. Kick us off. Tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Right. Phil Shepherd. I'm Director of Strategy and Architecture at 3, so I'll essentially look after the technology direction for 3's mobile network in the UK.
Hello everyone, my name is Daniela Petrovic. I'm here representing O2 Telefonica. I'm the founder of Darwin, an innovation R&D project we recently started within Telefonica O2.
And Tom Bennett, I'm Director for Mobile Innovation in BT&E. I'm accountable for some of the new technology and new fun stuff we're going to use on the mobile and converged network.
Okay, perfect. Well, first of all, let's just sort of create the situation where we are now. So obviously the UK, we haven't quite got, well, we have got 4 5G propositions up and running. We haven't quite got 4 mobile propositions up and running yet, but arguably we're the first market to have every single one of the major MNOs in the 5G world. So one thing I do want you to be sort of very honest with yourselves and look at other markets around the world and say, how are we actually getting on? You know, for instance, let's pick 3 or 4 off the top of our heads and say, let's compare 3 to South Korea, or O2 to China, and E to North America. So, who wants to start?
I'm not sure who lost there.
I'll start because it's like nobody can win, can it? So, you know what? I mean, it's interesting to do a comparison. I mean, the UK actually, if you look at it in terms of Europe, doing extremely well, very, very at the forefront. Even actually to do the States as well, also doing extremely well. If you compare to the extremes, and South Korea being one of the extremes, then obviously not as far ahead as that. South Korea, I mean, I've been in the industry for quite a while, in the mobile industry in South Korea, certainly in the last few years, have always been at the forefront. It's a cultural thing and it's a capabilities thing. If I was to say, I think we've got the spectrum sorted out in the UK largely. There's another piece coming out next year. We've got the technology being deployed. We have a more difficult challenge, I think, in the UK to roll out networks. regulations, planning. I think Tom was saying planning is a bit of an issue. It's quite hard work to do that. And we also have to deal with landlords in a much more difficult way than we do in, say, South Korea or in China. So I think it's harder to roll out quickly. But as a country across most of the developed world, we're doing extremely well at the moment. And actually, we've got 5G deployed. You mentioned, 5G deployments in the UK. We deployed home broadband fixed wireless access in August with Huawei equipment on 5G. That's got extremely good feedback from the customer base, really good speeds, seeing speeds in excess of a gigabit per second. It's really good and good experience. So I think let's look positive. I think you can compare with the very leaders in terms of the speed and of deployments, and we're a bit behind that. But as a global average, we're doing very, very well at the moment.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Oh, well, thank you for giving me a comparison with China. So definitely, I would say that 5G game is going to be more about the ways how we use 5G and about business models rather than who deploys first 5G and the way and the pace of deployment. So I think UK is in a very good position because we are trying to think innovatively. We are trying to involve ecosystems, so startups, academia, government in this story. So I think that is going to be very important. And countries that are going to compete in 5G actually are going to compete in new business models, which we need to deploy, supported by 5G.
I think they've covered the main points. I think if you look across America and Korea, very much there was a cultural race about who could be first, and I will embellish the point. The Korean government downwards absolutely applied the pressure to all the operators in the ecosystem to make sure they were first. And we saw that across everything, including the planning with the landlords, the rather more mundane part of our industry we don't talk about too much, but actually is key to the way in which we roll out. So we saw that with them. I think, in particular with the American market, they do have the issue around spectrum fragmentation in a way we don't in Europe and China. Exactly as the point was made, I think we're in a much better position to leverage a global ecosystem than probably the American market is. I think for us right here, right now, yes, if we're honest, yes, commercially, Korea have been much more aggressive, but across the global ecosystem, we're in a very good position.
I mean, this is something we were sort of touching on beforehand before we came up here. I mean, obviously, one of the big use cases, which for a lot of people in the industry is very frustrating, but you're talking about the bigger, faster, meaner mentality. This 5G gets you 500 megabits per second when you only need 50. But I mean, how important is it to win 5G contracts, if that makes sense? Like if you look at South Korea, they've had a massive, massive migration from 4G to 5G. It doesn't necessarily look like it's going to be the same in the UK, at least in the short term. But how much does that worry you, and considering the attention you've been given to enterprise over the last couple of years?
If I go first, I think for us, it is about a mobile-first mindset, and then very much a convergence, how you deliver it. Phil referred to FWA earlier. It's about delivering for your customers what they want, what they need. The perception is infinite bandwidth. That's not the reality. We know it's not the reality. But is the customer satisfied and overjoyed with what they're seeing as a service? That's our challenge as network engineers, as a network team to deliver, is ensuring they're getting what they need when they need it. Now, the way you're going to do that, yes, the absolute capability is going to be gigabit, etc., be it any individual phone is only achieving 50 to 500. When you start to bring enterprises on board and campus solutions, that's the promise that 5G brings, is the flexibility to deliver to all of those. So you need to be in it to win it, in essence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that enterprise market is going to benefit first if we start creating this new business model that can actually help them be more efficient in whichever industry we are talking about. So I think 5G is going to initiate this industry convergence more than any previous technology. in a way that we will enable new models to be deployed. So if we, latest project that we started in Harvard campus, we are talking about automotive industry, connected autonomous vehicles run by not only 5G, but satellite industry. So we started to think about convergence and how actually we can create ubiquitous services where we don't rely only on 5G coverage, but we cover the areas of non-coverage with the satellite industry.
I'll answer it. So, your point about the 500 megabits per second was interesting because I've been in mobile at least since 2G, and each generation there's people have said, and that's the same with fixed, is actually that's fast enough, that's all we need. And then the next generation then comes along and you go, actually it wasn't fast enough, we need something more. So there is an insatiable desire, even if you're just talking about the mobile first, as Tom was saying, that you need to do more speed and more capacity in there. I think also then new applications develop because you've got that capacity there, and you've got, particularly on 5G, a low latency service as well, which is something new, and that will be interesting to see what that develops and what that gives you. And then on top of that, then because you've got the capacity and the speed and the low latency, you've got new markets available. So I mentioned the fixed wireless access. That was it's now sort of giving speeds that are comparable with the combined fibre copper sort of networks that are out there. It will be interesting to see what other things develop. The game stuff is certainly enabled by it as an interesting item, and I do think there are some industries now like factories, etc., and private networks that will also be enabled by the capability here.
So this is, I mean, you can't really talk about 5G without actually talking about the enterprise applications anymore, and realistically, it's dominating the conversation. So I'd like to ask this question to you, and it might be a tricky one to answer, but which verticals want 5G, which are the ones that are engaged and used the most, and which are the verticals which actually need it, and how much crossover is there between those two answers?
So definitely the verticals we can see that are very much involved already are automotive, mining, and retail. So these three verticals are already thinking of the innovative ways how they can actually deploy 5G. There are obviously other verticals we want to inspire with working with these three verticals, like healthcare. So what are the next steps that we can do? But certainly by creating ecosystems around 5G technology and other convergent industries, we can hopefully inspire other industry verticals. We will create new industry verticals, because if in an example of connected autonomous vehicles, if we have 5G and satellite communication and connected autonomous vehicles in one ecosystem, and the universities building new innovative business models, and government with various regulatory bodies, we already have a complex ecosystem which is building new industry vertical. If the use case is connected autonomous vehicles, then we are building a new automotive industry vertical. If the customer is mining industry customer, we are building a new mining vertical. So hopefully when we create these verticals with the industries that are already interested, we will inspire others as well.
I think if we answer the question as connectivity, we tend to get carried away with 5G, but the point is connectivity.
Yeah.
For instance, for me, some of the work I do, the health service and the ambulance service in particular are very aggressive in the use of real-time data. For them, analysing and getting the right prognosis for a patient within seconds can improve the survivability for that patient. So they're incredibly aggressive and very innovative in their adoptive use of new technology. Why? Because it absolutely pays through to exactly as the point you're saying, which is some of the other industries are very heavily regulated for the right reasons. So we as a network and mobile industry have to learn the new cultures and work with them on the new regulations. If I take British nuclear fuels, a perfect example for private networks, but let's be frank, they have a bunch of regulations that we all have to be really clear about. So they're going to be very slow on that adoption curve by comparison. I think for us as an industry, that is the challenge. We're looking at a whole bunch of both our own ecosystem and then a series of new ecosystems we're going to need to partner with and work and collaborate with.
I mean, is this, I mean, Phil, because I know that one of the reasons, and I'm not going to say it's the entire reason, but one of the reasons that Three acquired UK Broadband a few years ago was to do with Spectrum and their private network business. Yeah. So are you seeing the same sort of challenges that Tom, or the opportunities that Tom brought up there? Is that maybe it is these highly regulated industries where there might be the greatest opportunity if you can nail it?
I was going to answer it in this way. There's, sort of building on what Tom said, there's industries that just want better connectivity, and I don't think they particularly care that it's 5G or 4G or whatever, as long as it's sufficient for what they want. So I think health at the moment is actually you just want good, reliable connectivity, and there's a lot more you can do. Yeah. I don't think, as you say, the remote surgery stuff is a long way off, and personally, I'm not sure I quite want to do it at the moment. But there are some industry verticals that actually need 5G, and there's two examples. One is gaming. If you want streamed gaming, you need the speed, and you also need low latency. And particularly when you're doing augmented or virtual reality, latency stops you feeling ill. And another industry is things like highly reliable communications in a factory-type environment. If it's not low latency, you can't have the safety systems that do it. So there's some that definitely need 5G, others that just benefit from the continued growth and speed that you get from 5G as a mobile connectivity.
Okay, and so moving on from that sort of area, but staying pretty much exactly the same place. Looking at the actual services that you can offer, I'm going to ask. I asked the previous panel to do this, to be pragmatic and blue sky thinking. So, be realistic. In the next 2 to 3 years, what can you actually bring to market, and what's the really exciting stuff that will be enabled within like 7 to 10 years?
I'm going to go with the phrase everybody uses. We always overestimate what we can do in 2 years and underestimate what we can do in 10. You've hit the nail on the head for me. I think in the next 2 years, it's probably worth. Is everybody familiar? Has anybody seen the new Star Wars trailer? Because my bet is, unless you play Fortnite, you haven't. It was released on Fortnite. So, to Phil's point, it's social gaming. Don't think about gaming as this niche. Gaming is social. So there's a whole brand new thing that happened over the weekend where all the brand new Star Wars trailers went into Fortnite. We don't see it if you're not in Fortnite. Now, gaming over the next 2 years is an absolute advocate for low latency right across the networks. So I think that really does become quite mainstream over the next couple of years. When you look at that 7 to 10 year horizon, yes, you're looking at the next RAN refresh cycle as well. So by then, you really are into, the complete homogeneous networks. Everything should have connectivity. So for me, the world is your oyster. You're back to the challenges that we discussed earlier around the ecosystems, the cultures, and to be frank, the regulations. I don't know, what's your view?
Definitely, my view is that 5G is going to help build connectivity overall globally. So there is a big project in Peru, Telefónica's project called Internet para Todos, Internet for Everyone, which is actually helping connect the unconnected. So we believe that definitely 5G is going to create that trigger for a bigger connectivity for everything. But we have to be realistic, because the changes in the new models that we are going to bring to the industry will bring the changes in new job roles. So if we have autonomous vehicles on our streets, we will have to have a role of safety driver sitting in that autonomous vehicle in order for regulators to approve that autonomous vehicle to be on the street. So we have to think now how we prepare this industry completely. It's not all about technology. Of course, technology is the enabler, but we have to think about all other things that are coming into play, like regulations, like new job descriptions, how we educate these new generations. Like we are talking about the gaming and improvement in gaming, but what that is going to bring. So does it mean that we will educate new generations through gaming. It might be an option. So we just have to think about all other elements that 5G is going to bring, not only connectivity.
I mean, I'll fire this one across to Phil, first and foremost. You talk about developing new business models. I mean, obviously, the telcos have to do that as well. You know, you guys can't exist in the same way you did 5 years ago. I mean, how far along the journey are you in modernizing your own business so you can actually fit in coherently in the digital ecosystem?
Yeah, so we've actually started a couple of years ago a complete transformation of our business, both technically and operating model-wise. So we've modernized going live with a completely virtualized core network, much expanded transmission network, and the RAN is being modernized at the moment. And together also our IT systems are going into the cloud and becoming very much more digital in terms of the flexibility. So we think that's necessary in order to compete, just to carry on competing. And then if you don't mind just quickly going back to the previous one, there was, in terms of where we think the business is, I think, first of all, it's continuing mobile connectivity opportunities, just getting us capacity and performance on it. We think fixed wireless access is a real opportunity because it gives speeds that are faster than the average broadband today, and it gets there quickly. And then we think there'll be a developing sort of enterprise business, which is sort of be interesting to see where it develops, but I think there's a lot of opportunities there that will start developing in the next 2 years.
Okay, so before we circle back to the business model evolution, I mean, because you brought up fixed wireless access, I mean, obviously, all three of you are mobile players, I mean, but how much of a genuine threat? Okay, yeah,
sort of both.
You were E beforehand, though, really, so,
to be fair.
how much of a genuine threat is fixed wireless access to the last mile, delivering fibre over the last mile, traditional broadband business?
There's a poison chalice of a question.
Yeah.
My personal view is I think we tend to get carried away with it. I think it is part of the armory of a set of products that we will deliver to market. It isn't that it's going to replace the last mile, but nonetheless, actually, you know what, in suburban areas, if we know the fibre is going to take a while to roll out, we should have FWA there as a substitute. Do I think it's a fundamental replacement over a 5 to 10 year time frame? Probably not. But I do think it will be part of the armory of the telecoms industry in consumer and enterprise for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's going to be important, but as I said, with 5G, we are not going to compete in the same way the industry competed before. We are going to compete in a different ways. So, like, it's going to be ecosystem competition rather than like purely technological silo industry players competition.
Okay, I guess this is the pressure's a lot on you here, Phil, because you are the company that has the fixed wireless access threat to the ecosystem. I mean, how long is this going to be until it could be mainstream?
So the fixed wireless, I mean, I'm going to agree with Tom actually. The fixed wireless access is, we're not seeing it as a complete replacement for fibre, but it's got its place. There are people that don't want to have the contracted fibre into the home. There are locations that actually fibre is going to be a long time to get to. So we think within that space there's a really good opportunity, and it doesn't have to be a complete replacement to be very helpful opportunity in that sort of 5 to 10 year period that you just talked about here. Ultimately, there will need to be a mix of fibre and wireless technology, and we all agree with that. It's just common logic, if you like.
Okay, and I guess so back to the question beforehand when we were talking about evolving the telcos. I mean, obviously, fixed wireless access is an excellent example of creating new products and new services, new culture, new type of people. I mean, from, Bill, you've given your perspective over at 3, but looking at O2 and sort of BTE, I mean, how are you guys in your sort of digital journey to take the mobile operator from the analog days through to the digital future?
What we are doing is, we've heard from the previous panel how we are allowing startups with various innovative technology solutions to come and try the various applications. If they work, that's great. We implement them. If not, we try something new. So what we do, we do the same thing with business modeling. So we do it from, so in Harvard Science Innovation Campus, we opened the business modeling lab, demo lab, and technology lab, where customers can come and try new technology. We build the new business models with them, and then we demo these various business models. So I think the only, with this combination of demoing, business modeling, technology, and including the regulators, we can go to the market with truly innovative services.
I agree really with the points made. I think, yes, there's absolutely a bunch of kind of ecosystem innovation. I run the mobile labs, and that's something we're absolutely doing in conjunction with the DCMS and our wider ecosystem, and particular partners and customers that want to come and literally play and try and innovate together, trying to bring those business models together. I think one of the other key customers for this new world in the next 2-3 years is ourselves. As a mobile industry, we know we need to get on with the virtualization of just about everything, and therefore the effect on our own business models, and we're a long way on that journey. And I think that's what Phil was alluding to earlier, which is actually the way in which we deliver. We've probably as an industry got long lead times around all the hardware and software delivery. Well, we know we need to move into a CI/CD model. That's our challenge of the next 18 months. We need to be in that daily, weekly release cycle, and that's just going to become the norm.
Okay, so I mean, so it's very much getting there, and I think one of the I'm having a look. I can't see Raheem here anymore, but he mentions that what is it about the 70-30 split at the moment. So we know what the 70% of 5G is, where the value is going to come from, and the next 10 odd years when we start playing around, we'll start to realise where the remaining 70% of the value actually comes from. So talking about whether it's ecosystems, politics, internal transformation, what are those barriers that are stopping you to fully realise the potential of not just 5G but connectivity?
Big question.
Yeah. That's quite a broad question.
Yeah.
You can take that in layers. Number one, rolling out in no uncertain terms, planning permission.
Yep.
It's very boring, to be frank, but the reality is how we deliver service to our customers, all of us. We need the permission to go on site and roll out this equipment. That is a phenomenal amount of the work we do on our industry, and bringing all the landlords with us on that journey is something we're going to have to proactively do as an industry over the course of the next few years, in particular when we get beyond the urban sites into suburban and rural.
Yep.
So that at the very base layer, and it's boring, but it is the towers and the rooftops. If we haven't done that, there is no connectivity. That's where I'd start. I don't know if that...
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I mean, we're in the middle at the moment of trying to implement a thing called ECC, Electronic Communication Code, which is trying to effectively lower the rental on sites. And if we need to put more and more capacity, we need to put more sites in over time, not immediately, as Hamish was saying, but we will be needing to put more in. If the rent doesn't come down, then prices will end up going up. So, and that is just so hard work in the UK, where there's a lot of legal cases going on at the moment to try, and a lot of challenges by landlords on it. So if you add that on top of that sort of disputes going on at the same time as the planning permission issues that we have, and we're also getting close to the limits of how much spectrum and power you can deploy on some of the sites as well. So there's quite a few practical challenges, which to some of the examples of the countries you mentioned earlier have not been such a problem. So we do need to get over those, and there's a whole barrier busting thing going on with government at the moment, which just needs to keep on really driving through to help us put 5G in more locations at the moment.
And to add to that, also, I would like, for example, to see autonomous vehicles on the streets in the next 2 to 3 years, but it's not going to be possible to do that quickly, because we are learning. This is a learning process, learning curve for all of us. So obviously, telecom operators are providing connectivity, and there is a very good example that European Commission actually favored 5G connectivity of the vehicles over vehicle-to-vehicle communication. So what does it mean? That 5G is going to play a big central role in this type of services. But we need to think about security and safety aspects. This is, again, a learning curve for us. We need to be very careful about that, and that's something that we are looking at carefully now. So all of these new services and connectivity are going to be great, and we are looking forward to implement them, but we have to look at carefully of what they are bringing as a threat with them.
So a lot of what you're saying there is around sort of bureaucracy, regulation, policy. I mean, how does the UK compare to? I mean, obviously you guys are UK centric. That's your job. How does the UK compare to other countries, regulatory? Let's start with the countries that have the same sort of political stance as us first. How do we compare against the rest of the world?
I'm not sure I could comment. I don't know the regulations of the rest of the world. I would say, for instance, Phil talked earlier about ICNIRP limits of non-ionising radiation. So we know that other countries, not in Western Europe at least, but other countries outside Western Europe, don't have those same limits. So that's a simple example of how it's much easier to roll out. I'm not sure I'd agree with that one particularly, personally. But it's an example. What I would say is you also see a lot more proactivity from the landlord estate with the government pressure. To be fair, in the UK, and I can't believe I'm saying the words, the DCMS is very proactive on this. There is a barrier-busting task force. They have been very proactive at working with industry and trying to bring industry and the landlords and the local governments, because there's very many tiers to the local governments, together on how we tackle this. And that's something that Hamish is working on behalf of all of us as an industry.
Because we had the project started with European Space Agency, it's very easy for me to compare UK Space Agency with 22 other countries which are members of European Space Agency. And I must say, there is, just figures will clearly tell the story that out of 1.2 billion budget for telecom industry in Europe, 400 million is actually coming from UK Space Agency. So there is a huge support from UK government in this sector. So especially in convergence of 5G and satellite industry. So there is a big implementation of 5G satellite convergence, and I would say there's a huge support. And obviously there are various catapults, like we've heard from Digital Catapult, there is a satellite catapult, and so on. So there are other government agencies that are actually helping building these ecosystems.
Probably might add much more, but I mean, it is a balance between open season for us to be able to do whatever we want, which some countries have basically said that's the most important thing, you do that. And there's that balance between public policy on whether the people want that and they want unlimited planning sort of permission. So there's always that balance. We think we need to shift it a little bit more because it is slowing down the industry deployment, but obviously it needs to be balanced with what the public want and in terms of planning and the like. So I think we're not too badly off. We've got quite a supportive government in there. I know that in Italy, for example, you talked about the ICNIRP radiation limits. The radiation limits in Italy are lower even than the UK, so actually they have real problems with actually deployment. So we're not the worst off, if you like, in all locations.
So do you think, just a quick final question then, do you think the government, the regulator, is striking the right balance at the moment?
My personal view is they're very proactive. They understand the pain of the last kind of 20, 25 years. We as an industry, to be fair, have got our act together much more. We have been problematic and thorny, I think, to deal with as an industry. We can't say we haven't been. But to be fair, yes, the DCMS and the regulator, everybody's after the same thing, which is connecting the UK. So yes, I see much more proactivity around policy and strategy.
Yeah, definitely, yes. I think that there is a right balance. Where I would like to see improvement is that legislation and regulations that are happening in various government departments are more connected. So, so there is no discrepancy. So that would be a real positive boost for us.
I mean, are you getting any noises from the likes of Ofwat or agencies like that, or is it just all Ofcom and all DCMS?
I think. Well, go on.
Well, for us, it's pretty much principally Ofcom and DCMS. I mean, me and Tom, we sort of regularly in meetings with those two same bodies, and they are 99%, I guess, of what I'm dealing with.
I think with the other industries, I mean, I used health earlier. For me, health, some of the blue light services, it's those services, it's the constabularies, it's the agencies, they're very proactive. So actually that's a kind of filtering upwards to the regulator at the right time. But and I think you both talked about what they're after is reliability of communication. Now we know we can do that with 5G.
Yep.
So it's bringing them on that journey.
Okay, perfect. Well, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. I really appreciate you spending a couple of minutes. And just a little bit of a tidbit before we actually leave. This is more for people streaming, watching it online. This entire event was live streamed over 5G. So I checked with the producer earlier, and apparently it's been tip-top, so
right.
I can actually say it. So,
Perfect.
congratulations, and thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. Cheers.